Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Divorce Differently podcast. Today, we're going to talk about technology and AI in particular. Now, we all know that AI is becoming part of our everyday life, and so it's no surprise that when you're going through divorce, you turn towards AI as well, whether it's to understand the process, to draft messages, or even to try to save money on legal fees. But when you're emotionally overwhelmed and sometimes desperate for answers, it can be hard to know where AI is genuinely helpful and where relying on it too heavily could create bigger problems down the line. So, in this episode, we're going to explore how to use AI as a practical support tool during divorce, but also talk about some of the risks that people overlook and where is the line between useful guidance and dangerous misinformation. To talk about this, I've invited David Lillywhite. David is a partner at Burgess Mee Family Law. Promoted to the partnership in 2019, David celebrated 10 years in the firm in October 2025 and is recognized in the Legal 500 as a next generation partner. David is a mediator and a collaborative lawyer as well, and he specializes in cases with a degree of financial complexity or where the factual and emotional landscape is usually difficult. David's private children practice often involves issues relating to the relocation of one parent abroad and cases involving allegations of abuse. David, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Chloe. I was about to thank you for the warm introduction, but I wrote it, so I was like, well, I've only got myself to blame for that.
You recognized the words. There was no
Yeah.
surprise there. So I'm really looking forward to picking your brain on this because, as you can imagine, these days, I think half of the conversations we have start with ChatGPT said,
Yeah.
and it is definitely a recurring concern when people are seeking legal advice and using AI in ways that feel like it could lead to issues later on. So in your experience, I know you've spent a lot of time working and talking about this topic. When is AI genuinely helpful? At what stage in the process do you think people should start using it, and how do you avoid relying on it too much?
Okay. Well, so in my day-to-day practice, we are seeing clients use it earlier and earlier, from looking to put together short lists of lawyers to speak to trying to model the outcome of their entire case from the off.
Wow.
I think it's that clients understandably are going through a very uncertain time in their lives, and they don't just want an answer, they want the answer,
Yeah.
and they want it straight away because they want to just put that uncertainty to bed as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And AI is this tool which all of a sudden seems to offer that.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, I mean, I call it kind of doom loading because ultimately a separation is a journey, and there's going to be good news, there's going to be bad news, and if you are asking AI for sort of a general summary, then it's likely also to sort of fuel that uncertainty. It's
Yeah.
only going to give you more questions.
Mhm.
And so I think really, no matter how resilient your lawyer might be, they've still got to sleep. Um, and I mean, that's something I sort of would generally pride myself on. But I think that, there are going to be times when your lawyer is not available.
Yeah.
And, I often in my day-to-day practice, I will often do letters for a client. I call them my 3 a.m. letters because
Oh
they're the
my.
thing. So when someone wakes up in the middle of the night and they
Yeah.
are feeling stressed and uncertain, they can have a kind of point of reference for where we are in the process, and they can say,
Yeah.
right, well, look, David has said that. Well, now AI has kind of replaced that. They're always
Sure.
on, and
Yeah.
it can be responsive as well. So I think AI can be helpful. I mean, I think it is something where it is here, it is not going away.
Yeah.
Um, I think we as solicitors have to assume at all times that our clients are using AI,
Yeah.
and they will also have an expectation that we're using it too. And we need to
Sure.
explain and say why we aren't. And so, yeah, in the context of a separation, I think AI can, and tech generally, can help provide information, and it can provide reminders. But I say that it should always be a tool rather
Yeah.
than a crutch. And
Oh, love that.
I think sometimes clients they in because of the situation they're going through and they're experiencing, they can't discern the difference.
Yeah. And what I hear a lot is actually people asking AI several times or in different ways the same questions and getting different answers, which actually leads to just more confusion and can be, can be really problematic later on. But you touched upon one point which I do find quite helpful for I'm sorry, for clients to use AI. It's preparing for meetings, and in particular if it's, a stressful meeting, whether it's the first time they meet their lawyer or they're going to their first mediation session, that kind of thing. Have you seen people use AI in a positive and helpful way in that context?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that no solicitor is ever going to not want more information from
Yeah.
a client. And AI, again, it can be a tool that helps marshal those thoughts. And AI can really help clients when they're preparing for their first meeting by helping them to sort of marshal their thoughts
Mhm.
and give them an idea of what they can expect.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes the issue is that AI will almost be overwhelming. It will almost
Yes.
present a sort of best case, this kind of idealized version of a lawyer that simply wants every single detail, and
Yes.
that is going to be overwhelming, not just for the lawyer, but also the client.
Yes.
They're not going to know where to start, and often we will say to people coming in to see us, look, put down, give to us a list of things, questions that you want answered,
Yeah.
things that are really preying on your mind. What are the kind of
Yeah.
really essential things you want to get out of the meeting? And so, AI can go both ways. So
Yeah.
it can either give you, too much to prepare and and again you get back into that situation where you think that this first meeting is going to provide the answer to every single one of your queries. We
Yeah.
have such a discretionary system, and again, it's reasonable for clients to want the answer, but the
Yeah.
fact is there rarely is ever a binary outcome.
That's absolutely right. And I think I like your analogy of the tool versus the crutch, because I think as a tool to help you structure your thoughts, to help you prepare for meetings, for conversations, it's actually really helpful. The problem is when it becomes a source of information and people rely on it as a source of truth, effectively. But in
Yeah.
preparing for meetings, I mean, as you say, lists of questions, going into a meeting with your lawyer with the key dates and facts about your case prepared. If AI can help you structure that, brilliant. If you want to dictate to AI your story and ask it to extract the key messages to share with the lawyer, what's going to be relevant to share with your lawyer, all that I find incredibly helpful for people because then they make the most out of those initial meetings. It's a great way for them to prepare. As you say, the problem is when they start saying, this is our financial situation. Tell me what I'm going to get out of this, this case. It's a lot less reliable in that context, and it really shouldn't be trusted as such.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's a really good point that you're raising there. I mean, it's about, that first meeting is about working with your solicitor rather than testing them against an unreliable teacher. So if you're turning
Sure.
up to kind of effectively sense check what AI is saying, then I think that that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
And so I think if you are using it to marshal chronologies or statements of issues, I mean, the key thing, and I know we're going to come on to this a bit later, but it's all about anonymization.
Yeah.
So clients shouldn't be feeding in what is going to be confidential information
Yeah.
into an AI.
Like
So
their spouse's Form E, for example.
precisely. Don't be dropping big health warning. Do not be dropping Forms E, names of children, names of you and your spouse into your AI and thinking that that will somehow get ahead. That is a
Yeah.
real danger area.
So are you saying that there's actually a lack of confidentiality? Whatever you put in there, it actually gets retained by the bot and it can be used later on, or does it get
Yeah,
read? How does it
absolutely.
happen?
Well, it can also be used if you're using one of the open AI,
Yeah.
then you are putting confidential information into something that could conceivably use that data to to be trained up in to train it up in future. So there's sort of two sides to that aspect. You've got the issue of confidentiality attaching to the proceedings
Yeah.
and the separation, but you've also got the potential for the waiver of advice privilege with your
Yes.
solicitor. If you are dropping in emails from your lawyer, then you need to be incredibly wary about that. I mean, this is a very new area. The courts are just starting to grapple with it.
Yeah.
But if you are going to use AI, then it needs to be on an anonymous basis.
Okay.
Just steer clear of putting in anything that identifies you or any of the real circumstances of the case.
That's a really good point. I hadn't thought of that. So definitely a word of warning there. I think
Yeah,
the other area where I see bigger risks, I guess, with people leveraging AI is when they start using it to write messages to their ex,
yeah.
or to deal with sensitive issues. It can help you to reword things in a more neutral vocabulary, a bit less emotional, that kind of thing. But what kind of risks do you see around people using it as a way of communicating with each other?
Well, exactly that. I mean, I think AI at the moment, I mean, it will lack the nuance and the insight that you as a separating party can bring uh, regarding the personal dynamics of a relationship. You
Yeah,
will know your spouse or your ex-partner better than AI would. And AI
yeah,
is really only the responses you get are only ever as good as the prompts you provide. If you're
true.
writing and fashioning these in a very broad way, then you're going to get kind of a very average kind of response.
Yes.
So I think what you were saying was very is right that you can use it to kind of brainstorm and give you ideas to say, well, how can I draft this neutrally? How can I rephrase this in a way that kind of softens the impact of what I'm trying to say? But what it shouldn't be doing is here is the situation. This is what my partner has said or my co-parent, and this is tell me what I should say back.
Yes.
Just
It's
dropping
advice
it.
again. Yeah,
Yeah,
entering into that realm.
exactly.
Yeah, that gets very dangerous. I think keeping the tone neutral is a good is a, I think it can be helpful for that. But I agree, as soon as you enter that space where you're asking for advice, the problem is it's garbage in, garbage out, right? So
Yeah.
the tool's going to be scraping the web for information. You don't know where that data comes from. So I'm sure you see a lot of people coming in and saying, well, on GPT or whatever, Claude, it said this, this, and that, and they're giving you what they believe is legal advice, but actually is might be from New Zealand rather than England or those kind of things. Do you want to share a few examples of things you've seen happen in that context that have actually led to people being really misled and disappointed down the line?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think it's obviously very difficult to give specific
Yes,
examples,
without going into the details. Yeah,
but often, we are seeing more and more people coming to us having already tried to model the outcome of their separation. So
yeah,
they are already thinking, and to some extent, it's a good thing thinking about where they want to be and what
hmm
they want to achieve. Those are,
yeah,
two questions I will always ask at a first meeting because I think that
hmm
really sometimes gets to the heart of what's important. But
agreed.
if you are asking the AI, giving it these the facts of your separation and then saying, right, tell me what the outcome is. And, I think even with a good prompt, given the lack of access to the right information and data sets that AI currently has. You have to be aware of where it is getting the information
Yeah,
from. And
yeah,
so often it will scrape historic blogs which may be out of date.
yeah,
Where sometimes clients will say, well, look, I can see that it's citing something, it's looking at some reference, so therefore it must really be okay. But
yeah.
actually, you need to look at the reference, think, well, when was that produced? Have there been any other further developments? So there's no substitute for coming to see a solicitor and getting
Yeah.
that kind of nuanced advice that really focuses on what you want to achieve.
Agree. And how do the courts react to when they see material that's obviously been generated through AI, whether, it's through a solicitor submitting it or a litigant in person? They can see a personal statement, things like that, where it's very clear that it's not coming from the person itself, that it's gone through AI. How are they dealing with those situations at this stage?
Sure. So there, I mean, there's a lot of press comment at the moment where advocates have been found to be using AI to produce case documents and pleadings. And, we've seen obviously a wholesale rejection of that. I think what will be interesting for family practitioners is and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier about waiver of privilege. If you
Yeah.
are using AI to prepare, for example, a statement,
Hmm.
then there's a question of, okay, well, what information rather did you provide to the AI to enable it to produce that statement? And
Yeah.
have you in fact breached confidentiality? Have you waived privilege over the advice that you received surrounding the production of this statement? I mean, it's an absolute minefield. And of
Yeah.
course, one of the first questions that is always asked about witness evidence is, is this your statement? Is that your
Hmm.
signature on the statement? Um, did you produce this? Are
Yeah.
these your words and your handwriting? And is it going to be the case that someone says, well, I got AI to help me with that? And of
Yeah.
course, it then opens the box, and then there could be lots of complications about whether or not privilege has been waived, the implications on confidentiality.
Yeah, that's true. So I guess when you're using AI in this context, whether you're a lawyer or a litigant in person, it's about making sure that you're choosing the right tools, because there are some tools that are secure and have been built specifically for family law or the legal system. I'm thinking, for example, of our family wizard that helps you rephrase, messages, stuff like that. How would you recommend people focus on in terms of the tools to use in that context?
So that's a really good question. I think really it goes back to what we were saying earlier about, does the integration of AI into the apps that a parent is using or a spouse using, is it a tool or is it going to be the crutch? You
Yeah,
mentioned something like Our Family Wizard, where the AI can really help with its tone meter, with the kind of way in which it helps co-parents communicate.
yeah,
Um, Again, it's all, is the AI being used to overwhelm the end user?
yeah,
That's again,
yeah,
and if it is, then it's just there as a bauble
yeah,
on the software as opposed to actually helping the client. And I think that that's where clients have to be a little more discerning.
yeah,
Is it just a trinket that isn't actually providing them with utility?
yeah.
So rather than sort of seeing the sales pitch and thinking, wow, AI is going to be the panacea once I start using this particular product. Well, actually, what is it really doing?
Yeah.
Um,
And there is such a thing as information overload, and especially when you're learning and coming to terms with a whole new legal system that you may not be familiar with. You may not know anyone who's been divorced. It's all a discovery process. Actually, I find that people sometimes feel they are getting too much information and conflicting information at times, and actually having one advisor is sometimes helpful because it avoids that confusion and just that overwhelm, as you're mentioning, that comes from so many different points of view and perspectives and pieces of advice. One thing I wanted to touch upon, and I know there's been a few cases lately with AI actually making up jurisprudence as well and coming up with ghost cases that
yeah.
people were using to then argue in court, based on X or Y previous case that never actually existed. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I haven't actually seen any of that in my day-to-day practice. This
Yeah.
is certainly seems to be in other spheres of legal practice. I think what we probably will see more of are litigants in person
Mhm.
using it as a crutch.
Yes.
So they will be thinking that they are going up against an ex-partner with a legal team, and they will
Yeah.
be looking for any kind of edge.
Yeah.
And I sort of sometimes liken the use of AI to a dopamine hit. It is a quick fix. If you're
Yeah.
suddenly getting letters from your ex-partner's legal team, or even just your ex-partner,
Hmm.
and you're feeling vulnerable and you are feeling alone,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden there is this thing that is this on-call tool that
Yeah.
suddenly can help you, and it kind of looks like a family lawyer's letter, and it sounds like a family lawyer's
Yeah.
letter.
It has all
So
the right words and fancy
yeah, so
vocabulary.
chances are it might be right, and what's the harm in that? And so often it will muddy the water.
Yeah.
And like you say, one of the things I constantly come back to is overload.
Yeah.
And you were talking about all the various places that people would historically get an informal sounding besides their
Yeah.
lawyer's advice. And this is not only is it another avenue of information, but it actively tries to help you. It will not only, give you so much information, it will then come with 6 or 7 suggested questions
Yeah.
that you are bound to click, and because you want to get all of that information, and
Yeah.
you
Of
go
course.
down a rabbit hole of information, and all of a sudden you are going to your lawyer with so many questions,
Yeah.
and there's no real thought to the strategic side of your matter. That
Yeah.
AI is not thinking really about what you want to achieve at every single stage. That's what, as good
Absolutely.
lawyers, we should be doing.
Yeah, and also, I mean, a lawyer will have the experience of the trends in family court and how how successful a type of argument might be versus another. Not, as you say, it's a very discretionary system. It's not black and white, and so expecting those kind of straightforward answers from your lawyer, from your AI tool is actually going to be detrimental because it sets expectations that are probably not the right ones.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always say that when you absolutely positively need the assistance of a solicitor, you should
Yeah,
accept no substitutes.
yeah,
And I think just because the area of work that we deal in has real nuance and depth, and that understanding is the value that you as a client bring, and that
yeah,
we as lawyers and divorce coaches bring to the table. And AI isn't there yet.
yeah,
I think we as practitioners, as I was saying earlier, just need to be aware that our clients are using this
yeah,
very, very early. They are, even before that first call with us, they are stress testing with AI. They're asking it and seeing just if they can get a little hint of where this is all going.
yeah. Yeah, and in that sense, I guess it is helpful because it's an easy way of getting information early on, and but it is no substitute for actual advice. So I know I'm sure you've seen through many of your clients some mistakes that are quite common in how people leverage AI. So I guess to finish the podcast, I'd love to get kind of your 3 tips for somebody who is going through divorce and is relying heavily on AI. What would you warn them against, and to make sure that they don't make those common mistakes and get burned?
Sure. So, I mean, first and foremost, stop using AI as your crutch.
Yeah,
Use it as part of your toolkit to navigate this journey, but don't confuse it for the roadmap. My second tip would be to understand that you should not be putting not only confidential information, but also the advice from your solicitor into
yeah,
the AI. Don't test your solicitor with the outputs that you are getting. Be
yeah,
wary of the feedback loop and the
yeah,
potential for bias that exists in AI as well.
yeah,
Um, and then my third tip would be to also trust your solicitor as well,
yeah,
because they are going to bring to bear their experience in this field. They
yeah,
have drafted countless letters and statements and pleadings, and they can really get into the kind of detail of your
yeah,
case.
yeah,
And I think, as part of that, it's also about not losing focus of what you as a separating individual want to achieve,
Yeah,
and making sure that, understanding that you can speak to your solicitor,
yeah, that's a good
and
point.
that's the most important line of communication,
Mhm.
and not to test them with what you are getting from
Yeah.
AI.
Like, so aside from being incredibly frustrated when people say, "Well, AI said this," and trying to correct you with a robot, I think the main sense is just if you're paying good money for somebody's advice, you're paying for that advice, that experience, that knowledge.
Yeah,
Take it. AI can give you some pointers, but why are you going to give a robot more credibility than a professional who has been, in the trenches and knows their field inside out? So I think that's a really good final point to end on. I think what
yeah,
I'll take away, David, is tool, not crutch. And I think that's a really good way of summarizing it. There's a lot of functionality in AI that can be incredibly helpful, but don't use it as a advisor effectively. And
yeah.
that's where you start getting into a dangerous zone.
Yeah, and that was going to be my third point, just looking at some of my notes. I think a final tip from me would be to look at what AI is putting out. It is
Yeah,
the same as with AI content in film and television and journalism. It's kind of a race to the average.
yeah,
We are seeing the use of AI more and more, not just in family law, but in all aspects of our lives. And it sort of lowers what the level of quality that we will accept
hmm
from entertainment, for example, or the
yeah,
written word. And I think that
yeah,
that sort
it's
of
true.
goes into the kind of communication that you are having with a co-parent. That if you're asking AI, it's going to give you kind of that sort of average kind of message out, as opposed to
Yeah,
something that actually really helps you.
which is often why it's so recognizable, actually,
Yeah,
because it has that kind of tone of just very kind of, run of the mill kind of answer.
precisely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, David. So much helpful information. I really hope people take away that key message of being aware of the limitations of AI, but I do think there's a lot of things that it can help with. And of course, it's going to keep on developing and improving, and God knows where it'll lead us. But this is really, really helpful. Thank you so much for your time,
Oh, thank
and
you for
have,
having me.
have a great day.
Yeah, thank you, Chloe.